I'm a lab rat. And you're probably wondering, what is a lab rat? Well, it's actually a cute term that we use for people who spend their days and nights trying to answer the biggest questions of the world. And the nice thing about being a lab rat is that when you finally find the answer, you don't have to worry too much about it. You're going to publish it in an academic journal that nobody's going to read, or you're going to put it in a chapter of a book that nobody's going to open, or you're going to go to some conference and put it on a poster that nobody's going to see. Welcome to being a lab rat. However, there are some people who decide that instead of going that route, they want to make a change. They want to go out and change the world. They want to be lab rats of disruption. But here's the problem. When a lab rat actually comes out of the lab, well, let me just show you an example. Here's something in life sciences that you all know very well, but this is how a lab rat would describe it. It's a chemical that adds an acetyl group to cyclooxygenase 1 and 2, preventing the transformation of arachidonic acid into prostaglandins, and thereby reducing inflammation, swelling, pain, and fever. Now, how many of you know what that is? Aspirin. Now, I know, you're thinking, what the hell? So for you tech people out there, here's one for you. It's a device with contact locations being connected to conductors that send byte-long interrupts to a central processor for inclusion in random access memory. Come on, everybody knows what this is, right? It is a keyboard. Now, how many of you would imagine if Steve Jobs had actually described his keyboard like that? All right, for those of you who are not tech or life sciences, I've got this one for you. It's a deformable rubber element with a tubular handle used to apply increased atmospheric pressure upon an obstruction within a domestic waste outlet line. Come on, tell me what it is. It's a plunger. So here's the thing. Lab rats, when they come out of the lab and into the real world, have a slight problem, and that is when they start to describe things, they do it about as clear as mud. And the reason that happens is because we as lab rats are actually taught to use a very technical term in order to describe our material. It's called technobabble. And the problem is that when you actually want to go out into the real world, they don't know technobabble. Don't use it. And yet, I have friends and colleagues who, much like myself, are mild-mannered, lab-wearing people in the lab. But then all of a sudden, they decide that they're going to take that lab coat off. They're going to go into the real world. And you know what they do? They start yelling technobabble. By the way, this was actually the front page of a newspaper in Canada, and it went all over the country, and that's why I'm known as the mad scientist. So the question is, how are you going to go out and be a lab rat of disruption without actually using technobabble? And unfortunately, I already showed it to you. It has to be as easy as pie, and it also has to be easier than a pie. I didn't make this. I don't know who did, but applaud to them. Because I don't know how many exact numbers there are from 3.1, 4.1, 1.2, 4.8, whatever. But quite honestly, I don't have the time. I'd rather do a Jamie Oliver, like 30-second, throw it in and, ooh, look, it's food. So what exactly is PI? Well, it's an acronym that stands for Purpose, Intervention, and Execution. And it's very simple. It's what is the need, or as we like to call it, what is the hypothesis, or the research question? What is the intervention? How are you going to solve and answer the problem? And finally, the execution, how is it going to work in real life? Now, that is very, very simple. And I would take lots and lots of time to be able to explain it to you. However, I'd rather introduce you to Vincenzo. Now, if you were here at Slush last year, you might actually recognize this guy. He's a professor at the University of Helsinki, and he actually came to Slush to promote his research as a lab rat of disruption in the hopes of getting $100,000. Now here, for your wonderful pleasure, is a recap of what Vincenzo showed you. It was a tumor-specific MHC1 restricted peptide that is absorbed onto a viral capsid and directs immunity towards the tumor, leading to increased efficacy against melanoma. Now, That, for me, is amazing. I think it's fantastic and worth $100,000. For all of you who probably are not microbiologists, immunologists, oncologists, and also metabolism experts, well, let me tell you something. No amount of atmospheric pressure is going to help you. But he used the principles of pi to come up with the actual answer, which is viruses can help cure cancer. Make it as easy as pi, and you can become a lab rat of disruption. Now, what exactly are you doing? Well, it's very simple. You're actually taking something that looks very complex, perhaps very abstract, and something that you can't understand very well, and you're turning it into something that's absolutely beautiful. Now, I know this thing probably doesn't look all that beautiful to you, but to me, it's absolutely amazing. It's called a tardigrade. Some people call it a water bear. And it's one of the most amazing and probably the most fascinating creatures on the face of the planet. And you want to know why? It doesn't die. You can starve it. You can desiccate it. You can zap it with gamma rays. Boom, boom, boom. It's still going to live. And I tell you something, the other reason I love it is because it became the actual basis for a startup company that I really wanted to come up with. And I was really kind of hoping I was going to bring the Slush. Are you ready to see what it is? Oh, and by the way, I have an amazing slogan for it, so just get ready. Here we go. It is the one, the only, Tardipet. You can't see them, but you won't have to flush them down the toilet, unlike Skipper here. But don't worry, goldfish fans. I didn't bring it to Slush. And that's because as much as I believed in my Tardipet, I couldn't get it to go out to anyone because nobody would collaborate with me. No one would talk with me. And that's the other thing about being a lab rat of disruption. If you go out on your own, you're probably not going to get anywhere. You really have to team up. And the thing is that when you're starting to team up, you're going to have to start understanding how to keep pi in mind, because you're going to have to learn that the real world doesn't always speak your language. In actual fact, there's a number of languages out there. You know, I speak Anglais, Français, Deutsch, Paruski, Wonk, VC, business, all these different languages. And the reason I've had to do that is because I talk to all these different conferences and I have to speak their language. However, you don't have to as a lab rat of disruption. All you need to do is make sure that you team up with people who are going to bring you there. And while that's actually going to elongate the time that it takes, it's actually going to have a much better impact down the road. And just to give you an example of this, I'd like to introduce you to Ate. Now, for those of you who actually are from Slush, I don't need to introduce you to him because he's the guy that created this whole conference. He's absolutely fantastic, really cool dude. And the fact is, he probably could just rest on his laurels, having known that Slush has turned into such an amazing conference, but he didn't. He had a passion, he had a purpose. There was something else that was driving him. He was like the entrepreneur that you see in the United States with the bright, flashy, blondish, orangey hair. He wanted to make karaoke great again. But the thing is that he wanted to do this back in the early 2000s, and it just wasn't working. So what he had to do is he had to actually team up with some people. And eventually, over time, they finally got to something that's called Singa. Now, this is a karaoke app, and they actually have a booth just down here, and I recommend that you go and talk to them because it's absolutely amazing, because it will bring karaoke anywhere you can go. Now, I know, you're probably thinking, wait a second, what do I need karaoke for? And the answer is, you never quite know when you're going to be so drunk that you actually agree to take the microphone. And remember, you're in Finland, which means that eventually someone's going to have to end up singing Lordy. And honestly, when it comes to the first line, hard rock, hallelujah, not so bad. When you get to the second one, hard rock, hallelujah, no. Practice, dude, practice. Now, for those of you who are not from Finland, you probably may not have heard of Lordi. They actually won Eurovision back in 2006. And the reason that you probably haven't heard about them is that it's currently 2016. And this brings me to the next point that I need to make about being a lab rat of disruption, and that is hype. You see, when you win Eurovision, you actually get a lot of hype. But that doesn't necessarily mean that's actually going to stay with you. And that can be a major problem if you're trying to change the world. And I'll just give you an example from my own experience. How many of you remember the Ebola outbreak? Just, raise your hands, whatever. Yeah, good. And if you don't remember the Ebola outbreak, what the hell's wrong with you? Holy crap. See, I actually ended up being interviewed hundreds of times about Ebola. And usually it was, don't worry, it's not coming to Canada. Don't worry, it's not coming to America. No, you're not gonna die. Yeah, it's in Texas, but so what? So the fact is that it was okay. However, every now and then I actually got a really cool opportunity to go onto the Business News Network and talk about the financials of Ebola. Now you're probably thinking, wait a sec, Ebola is like a virus and it kills people. How the hell does business get involved in it? And here's the answer. It's a company called Techmira. Now you probably never heard of them, and if you have, yay, because you know where I'm going with this. They actually came up during the Ebola outbreak with something called siRNA. And basically all it did was you put it into the body, it attached to the Ebola so that it could no longer reproduce. And if you can't reproduce, you can't kill a person. So, yay! We can save people. And it was considered to be experimental therapy, and the World Health Organization and my colleagues over there actually agreed to it, and I told them they're a bunch of idiots for doing it, but they still went with it anyways. So I got invited to actually talk about Techmira on business networks. And they said, Jason, don't you think this is an amazing opportunity to really gain money and growth? And I'm like, unless you know how to short a stock, no. Now, how many of you here know how to short a stock? Exactly, the guys here, yeah, I do. Well, the thing is shorting is basically a simple way of making something work in your advantage. And does this laser work? No, it doesn't. See these peaks here? These are day-long intervals where the price goes really, really high and then it drops. That's called shorting a stock. And the thing is that I was explaining to people that you're going to end up shorting this stock until finally it goes into the basement. And now you're seeing here 3 months of Techmira, during which it actually rose, got shorted a few times, but kept going up. That's wonderful, that's fantastic, that's great. Unfortunately, how many of you still know about Ebola other than Jason up here saying Ebola? Yeah, it went away, didn't it? And guess what happened to Techmira? It went away too. See, back in July, when I was first talking about it, it was at $10. And I was telling people, don't invest long, don't go long, because if you do, you're gonna end up getting killed. And by October, when it became so clear that if there was something happening, it went up to $30. Now, that's awesome if you happen to be Martin Shkreli. If you're not, you're in a big whole bunch of hurt, because as of December 2014, it was down to 12. And I looked at it just a few days ago, and it's at $3. $3. Now, just to give you an idea of how important it means, you can actually buy a stock for less than it actually costs to buy a plunger. That is the problem with hype. So if you want to be a lab rat of disruption, here's your to-do list. The first thing you have to do is get out of the lab, use the principles of Pi, learn how to speak clearly, and make sure that people understand that you are in control of your topic. Anyone out there wants to talk to me about microbiology, immunology, neurology, any of that stuff, I'm totally happy to talk with you about it, and I'll show you exactly how you can change that from technobabble to clear Pi. Make sure that you don't hype it up. How many people, even here at Slush, I've had say to me, oh my God, Jason, the microbiome is the future. It's amazing. It's going to do absolutely everything for you. No. Because we're seeing clinical trials now that are actually saying, no, not really. You have to understand that there's so much more than just the hype. And if you stay with the hype, you're going to end up actually losing out in the end. And finally, you have to realize that disruption is a natural process. We used to call it, back in the 80s, evolution, business evolution. Now we call it disruption, whatever. But the only way that evolution is going to go forward is when it's guided by experts. And as lab rats, you are the experts. All you need to do is figure out how to turn it into something beautiful from that complex craziness that you're used to in the lab. And eventually what will happen is the world is going to see the beauty, not just of your idea, of your answer, but also how it can theoretically change the world. And for the record, and I got to put myself in position here, I'll give you 2 examples. These are my books. They are totally devoted to microbiology. They're also bestsellers. Not because people really want to learn about the microbiome, because they came out before that whole hype happened, but because they're written using pi. If you pick up the germ code, you're not going to read about microbes in the lab. You're going to read a Woody Allen type novel about our dysfunctional relationship with microbes. And if you go to the germ files, you're not going to all of a sudden start seeing something that probably should have been on a Fox network. You're actually going to read a concept album where every chapter is actually lyricized to help you understand how to live with microbes so that you can be both healthy and also make fun of your friends who are not. That's how you disrupt, ladies and gentlemen. And that's how me, as a lab rat, learned how to be a disruptor. And every single one of you out there who is a lab rat can do the same. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful day.